The old courtroom had never felt so silent. Every wooden bench was filled. Every camera pointed toward the man standing between two court officers. Lucas Carter kept his head high despite the chains around his wrists. He had spent 18 exhausting months insisting he was innocent. Yet in only a few seconds, Judge Nathaniel Harrison would decide whether he would spend the next 25 years behind bars for allegedly stealing millions from one of the country's most powerful financial corporations. Outside, rain tapped softly against the courthouse windows, while inside, the air felt heavy enough to steal every breath. Reporters adjusted their microphones. Lawyers gathered their files. The prosecutor wore the confident smile of a man who believed victory was already his. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city, state, or country in the comments below. I read as many comments as I can, and it's always amazing to see how far this story reaches. And if you enjoy powerful stories about courage, justice, and hope, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Now, let's go back inside the courtroom. Judge Harrison, confined to a wheelchair since a devastating accident 8 years earlier, looked down at the final sentencing papers. His calm voice echoed across the room. Lucas Carter, before this court pronounces sentence, do you have anything further to say? Lucas swallowed hard. Only the truth, Your Honor. I didn't do this. The judge lowered his eyes without responding. Then the courtroom doors slammed open. A frightened little girl rushed inside, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her cheeks wet with tears. Daddy! Every head turned. Before anyone could stop her, 10-year-old Emma Carter stood in the center of the courtroom, staring directly at the judge. Please free my daddy, she cried, her small voice trembling but determined. And I'll make you walk again. For one heartbeat, nobody moved. Then laughter exploded across the courtroom. Even reporters chuckled. Several jurors exchanged puzzled looks. One attorney whispered, "Poor child." Judge Harrison leaned back, allowing himself a faint, skeptical smile. "Young lady," he said calmly, "do you understand where you are?" Emma nodded without fear. "I do." The judge glanced toward the security officers. "You have exactly 60 seconds to explain yourself before you are escorted out." The laughter faded. Every eye remained fixed on the little girl, waiting to hear the impossible. Lucas's face drained of color as he looked at his daughter standing alone before an entire courtroom. His voice cracked with heartbreak. "Emma, sweetheart, please stop. You don't have to do this." She turned toward him, tears shining in her eyes, but she refused to move. "I have to, Daddy." Lucas shook his head desperately. "You've already been through enough. Don't let them laugh at you because of me." His words carried Emma back to happier days, long before police cars and courtroom doors had stolen their peaceful life. She remembered falling asleep while Lucas read adventure stories beside her bed, changing his voice for every character until she laughed herself to sleep. She remembered birthday mornings when he somehow found enough money for balloons despite working endless overtime. She remembered hospital nights when illness kept her awake, and Lucas never left the chair beside her, whispering, "You'll never face anything alone while I'm here." Those memories weren't extraordinary because of expensive gifts or grand adventures. They were extraordinary because he had always chosen her before himself. Then another memory surfaced. Only 3 weeks before his arrest, Lucas had returned home unusually quiet. After checking every window and locking the front door twice, he knelt beside Emma and gently held her shoulders. "If anything ever happens to me," he said softly, "I need you to trust the blue envelope." She frowned. "What blue envelope?" "You'll know when it's time." "What's inside?" He forced a smile that never reached his eyes. "Something the wrong people hope nobody ever finds." Before she could ask another question, he hugged her tighter than ever before. Now, standing inside the courtroom, Emma realized that moment had never been about fear. It had been a warning. The blue envelope wasn't just a memory. It was the one secret her father had trusted only to her. And somewhere beyond those courtroom walls, someone was praying it would remain hidden forever. Emma drew a slow breath, ignoring the whispers spreading across the courtroom. She wasn't there to beg for sympathy, and she wasn't about to waste the precious seconds the judge had given her. Your Honor, she said, her voice steadier than anyone expected. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for my daddy. Judge Harrison folded his hands. Then what are you asking? I'm asking you to remember. A puzzled silence settled over the room. Emma looked directly into the judge's eyes. The accident that put you in that wheelchair wasn't an accident. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor shot to his feet. Objection! This is outrageous. The child is making reckless accusations that have absolutely nothing to do with this case. Emma didn't even glance at him. My daddy told me there are people who make terrible things look like accidents. They did it to you, and now they've done it to him. The judge's expression changed almost imperceptibly. The confidence that had filled his face moments earlier gave way to something deeper. Recognition mixed with unease. Careful, young lady, he said quietly. Those are serious claims. I know. Who told you this? My daddy didn't tell me everything, Emma admitted. He only said that one day I'd understand why honest people that sometimes disappear, lose everything, or get blamed for things they never did. The prosecutor slammed his file onto the table. Your Honor, enough. This is nothing more than emotional manipulation. The defendant has clearly coached this child to disrupt these proceedings. Lucas shook his head violently. No, I swear I never told her to come here. Emma raised her voice before anyone could interrupt again. My daddy found something years ago, something connected to the people who wanted your investigation to stop. Those same people framed him because they were afraid he'd expose them. For the first time that morning, Judge Harrison didn't answer immediately. He simply stared at the frightened little girl before him. The laughter had vanished. In its place remained an unsettling question that no one in the courtroom could ignore. What if she wasn't imagining any of it? Emma slowly slipped off her backpack and placed it on the polished courtroom floor. Every movement seemed impossibly loud in the heavy silence. She unzipped the front pocket, reached inside, and carefully pulled out an old children's storybook. Its faded cover showed a castle beneath a bright blue sky, the corners worn from years of bedtime reading. Lucas's eyes widened. No, Emma. She opened the book halfway and gently removed a sealed blue envelope hidden between its pages. I promised Daddy I'd protect this until the right time. The judge motioned for the bailiff to bring it forward. Inside were neatly folded financial reports, handwritten notes in Lucas's unmistakable handwriting, pages covered with unfamiliar names, and long strings of encrypted account numbers. Several transfers had been circled in red ink, while arrows connected companies that appeared unrelated. The prosecutor glanced over the documents before laughing dismissively. Meaningless paperwork. None of this proves anything. Judge Harrison remained silent, carefully turning each page. I don't understand these codes, he admitted. Neither did the defense attorney, nor did the investigators gathered near the bench. Then, from the back of the courtroom, an elderly man slowly stood. It was Samuel Brooks, a retired courtroom clerk who had served under 3 different judges before retiring 5 years earlier. Your Honor, he said, his voice trembling. May I see the last page? The document was handed to him. The color drained from his face. I know this signature. Every eye fixed on him. It belongs to Richard Holloway. The courtroom grew still. Judge Harrison frowned. Holloway, the former financial investigator who disappeared before testifying against several government contractors? Samuel nodded. He vanished 12 years ago, 2 days before delivering evidence to this very courthouse. Officially, He resigned without explanation. Emma tightened her grip on the empty envelope. Outside the courthouse, across the street, two men sitting inside a black SUV lowered their binoculars. One reached for his phone. "They've opened the envelope," he whispered. "We've run out of time." Judge Harrison ordered the documents sealed as evidence, but before the court could examine them further, the lights flickered once. Then every security monitor mounted along the courtroom walls turned black. A court officer frowned. "We've lost every camera in the building." The timing chilled the room. Technicians rushed toward the control center while the judge quietly instructed everyone to remain inside. Within minutes, another unsettling report arrived. The first retired accountant listed in Lucas's handwritten notes had vanished from his home that morning. Neighbors claimed two unidentified men had visited him shortly before sunrise. No one had seen him since. Emma instinctively reached for her father's hand. The prosecutor, suddenly less confident than before, avoided looking at the blue envelope. An hour later, while investigators searched the records for answers, Lucas's attorney received an anonymous message on his phone. "Tell the girl to forget the envelope, or she'll lose more than her father." His face turned pale. Before anyone could process the threat, another call came from Emma's neighbor. Someone had forced open the back door of the Carter house. Every drawer had been emptied, every cupboard searched, furniture had been overturned. Nothing valuable had been stolen. Only one thing appeared to matter. "They were looking for documents," the neighbor whispered. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they wanted." Judge Harrison slowly removed his glasses, his expression growing heavier with every new report. This was no longer a straightforward fraud trial. Someone wasn't protecting stolen money. Someone was protecting a secret powerful enough to silence witnesses, erase evidence, and terrify innocent families. The judge looked across the courtroom at Lucas, then at Emma, whose frightened eyes still refused to surrender. After a long silence, he struck his gavel. "This court is postponing sentencing until further notice. Effective immediately, every document connected to this case will be re-examined under my direct supervision." Across the city, inside a luxurious office overlooking the skyline, an unseen figure watched the breaking news. Without a word, he closed the curtains. Then he made a single phone call. "Fix this," he said coldly, "before the child destroys everything." Long after the courthouse had emptied, Judge Harrison remained alone in his chambers. The silence felt unfamiliar, almost accusing. Emma's words echoed through his mind with relentless clarity. The accident wasn't an accident. For 8 years, he had accepted that painful truth as fate. A wet road, failed brakes, terrible luck. But now doubt refused to leave. He unlocked a dusty cabinet hidden behind rows of legal books and removed a worn archive box labeled with the date of the crash. It contained police reports, medical records, newspaper clippings, and the investigation he had never found the courage to read again. One forgotten folder caught his attention: maintenance records. His brow tightened as he examined the mechanic's report. According to the official file, his car had been fully inspected only 2 days before the collision. Yet another document, recently recovered from the Transport Authority's digital archive, revealed a different story. Someone had accessed the vehicle after the inspection. The brake line had been replaced. No authorization, no recorded technician, no explanation. Judge Harrison leaned back, his heartbeat quickening. Then another memory surfaced. The day before the crash, he had been preparing search warrants against Ashcroft Financial Group, the very corporation where Lucas Carter had uncovered suspicious transactions years later. He had believed those files disappeared in the wreckage. Now he wasn't so certain. If the brakes had been tampered with, then the collision hadn't merely stolen his ability to walk. It had stopped an investigation. His hands trembled as the weight of another possibility settled over him. Had he unknowingly sentenced innocent people while the real criminals remained free? Outside his office, thunder rolled across the night sky. Judge Harrison slowly closed the file, the burden of 8 lost years pressing heavily upon his conscience. For the first time since the accident, he wasn't haunted by what he had lost. He was haunted by what he had failed to uncover. The following morning, federal officers offered Emma and her father immediate witness protection. A safe house had already been prepared outside the city, far from curious reporters and unseen enemies. Emma quietly shook her head. "If we disappear now," she said, "the people who hurt everyone will think they won." Judge Harrison studied her with growing admiration. She was only 10, yet fear no longer ruled her decisions. Instead of hiding, Emma accompanied investigators as they revisited forgotten evidence. She never claimed to know legal procedures, but she remembered conversations adults had dismissed, faces they had forgotten, and small moments that suddenly carried enormous meaning. One forgotten nurse recalled unusual visitors at the hospital on the night Lucas had stayed with Emma. A retired accountant recognized account numbers identical to those hidden inside the blue envelope. An elderly police officer, long retired and burdened by years of regret, admitted he had once been ordered to ignore financial records linked to Ashcroft Financial Group. "I should have spoken then," he confessed. "Maybe innocent people wouldn't have suffered." His courage inspired others. Former employees arrived carrying old notebooks. Office assistants surrendered copied emails they had secretly saved. A warehouse supervisor produced delivery logs that had mysteriously vanished from company archives years earlier. Piece by piece, the wall of silence began to crack. News of Emma's determination spread across the city, encouraging ordinary people to choose conscience over fear. Yet someone always seemed one step ahead. Each time investigators prepared to question another witness, that person received threats or disappeared before officers arrived. Confidential search warrants somehow reached suspects hours before they were executed. Evidence lockers were mysteriously accessed during the night without signs of forced entry. Judge Harrison stared at the growing pattern with quiet alarm. "The leaks aren't coming from outside," he murmured. "They're coming from inside law enforcement." The room fell silent. If trusted officers were secretly protecting the conspiracy, every strategy, every witness, and every piece of evidence was already reaching the enemy. Suddenly, no one knew whom they could truly trust. The corrupt network had finally realized the investigation was closing in. Hidden behind polished boardrooms and private phone calls, panic replaced confidence. Their unseen leader listened without emotion as frightened associates described the blue envelope, new witnesses, and Judge Harrison's determination. 24 hours, he said quietly. Destroy everything, every record, every backup, every witness still breathing with the truth. Across the city, investigators worked through stacks of documents, but frustration mounted. The envelope proved Lucas had been investigating corruption, yet it still lacked one decisive piece linking in the conspiracy directly to its leaders. Without it, clever lawyers could dismantle everything in court. Emma sat silently beside her father, watching detectives argue over numbers and signatures. Then a memory flickered unexpectedly. Months before his arrest, Lucas had spent evenings recording bedtime stories on an old digital voice recorder whenever work kept him away. He always ended each story with a private message meant only for her. Emma's eyes widened. "The recorder," she whispered. Lucas looked confused. "The last recording. You told me never to erase it, even if it sounded strange." They searched through dusty boxes collected from the house after the break-in. Finally, Emma found the scratched recorder tucked inside an old shoebox. Its battery barely worked. Lucas pressed play. At first, only static filled the room. Then his warm voice emerged, reading a familiar fairy tale. Just as the story ended, his tone changed. Calmly, he spoke a sequence of letters and numbers, followed by a single sentence. "The truth sleeps where the river meets the stone bridge." Everyone froze. Judge Harrison immediately recognized the location. Beneath that abandoned bridge stood an old storage facility once used by Ashcroft Financial Group. If Lucas had hidden evidence there, they had only hours to reach it before the conspiracy erased the truth forever. The abandoned storage facility stood in darkness beneath the old stone bridge, its rusted doors hanging slightly open, as though someone had left in a hurry. Police officers swept the building while investigators searched every shelf, every filing cabinet, and every forgotten box. For several tense minutes, they found nothing except dust and broken furniture. Then Emma noticed a loose floorboard beneath an old wooden desk. "Here," she whispered. Officers carefully lifted it away. Hidden below was a waterproof metal case. Inside lay several encrypted hard drives, printed bank transfers, signed contracts, and a handwritten journal belonging to Lucas. The forensic team worked rapidly, unlocking the files before anyone could interfere. What appeared on the screen stunned the entire room. Lucas had never stolen a penny. He had uncovered a sophisticated laundering operation that had secretly diverted millions through fake charities, shell companies, and inflated public construction contracts. Money meant for children's hospitals, schools, and community projects had quietly disappeared into private offshore accounts controlled by influential executives, politicians, and their trusted associates. Every suspicious transaction listed inside the blue envelope matched the digital records perfectly. But the final folder revealed something even more disturbing. 8 years earlier, Judge Harrison had authorized a confidential investigation into the same financial network after receiving anonymous evidence from an internal whistleblower. Days before search warrants were to be signed, mechanics working under false identities had deliberately sabotaged his vehicle's braking system. The collision had never been accidental. It had been carefully planned to silence the one judge willing to expose the organization. Judge Harrison stared at the screen in complete disbelief. "The warrants," he whispered. "They knew I was coming." Lucas slowly opened the final page of his journal. "If you're reading this," he had written, "they've probably succeeded in framing me. They couldn't destroy the evidence, so they destroyed the people holding it. If the truth survives, promise me you won't stop with my name. Clear everyone's." At last, every unanswered question found its place. The blue envelope, the missing witnesses, the threats, the disappearing evidence, the brake failure, the anonymous messages. None of it had been random. It was one carefully orchestrated conspiracy stretching across years. Emma looked at her father, tears filling her eyes. "You were telling the truth all along." Judge Harrison slowly closed the journal. "So were you." For the first time since this nightmare began, justice was no longer chasing the truth. The truth had finally caught up with justice. 3 days later, every seat inside the courthouse was occupied. Television cameras lined the walls, reporters filled the aisles, and anxious whispers echoed through the chamber. What had begun as a routine fraud sentencing had become the most closely watched hearing in the nation's recent history. Judge Harrison entered without his wheelchair, leaning firmly on a polished wooden cane. The courtroom noticed immediately. No one spoke. His voice carried a confidence that had been missing for years. "This court is reconvened to consider newly discovered evidence affecting not only the case of Lucas Carter, but numerous investigations compromised by deliberate criminal interference." One by one, executives from Ashcroft Financial Group took their seats. Beside them sat senior investigators, corporate attorneys, and public officials who had once believed their influence placed them beyond accountability. Then the witnesses began speaking. The retired accountant described falsified financial statements. The former nurse confirmed Lucas had remained at the hospital during the alleged theft. The retired police officer admitted that evidence had been intentionally buried under direct orders from powerful superiors. Finally, forensic experts presented the recovered hard drives, authenticated bank records, and Lucas's journal. Every document confirmed the same devastating truth. The prosecutor attempted one final objection, claiming the evidence had been manipulated. Before he could continue, the lead forensic examiner calmly displayed digital timestamps, verified signatures, and encrypted archives proving the files had remained untouched for years. His argument collapsed. Silence swept across the courtroom. Judge Harrison looked directly at Lucas. Mr. Carter, this court finds that you were deliberately framed by individuals seeking to conceal an extensive criminal conspiracy. The conviction against you is hereby vacated in its entirety. Lucas closed his eyes, overcome by emotion. The handcuffs that had defined his life for nearly 2 years were gone. So is your record, the judge continued. From this moment forward, you stand before this court as an innocent man. Emma burst into tears and threw her arms around her father. Across the courtroom, spectators rose to their feet. Some applauded, others simply wept. Justice had arrived at last, not quietly, but with the undeniable force of truth finally refusing to remain buried. The applause gradually faded, leaving behind a silence far more powerful than any celebration. Judge Harrison looked around the courtroom, his eyes resting on faces that reflected relief, regret, and hope. For years, he had believed the greatest loss of his life was the accident that had confined him to a wheelchair. Now he understood the deeper wound had been allowing fear to silence his pursuit of truth. He lowered his head. I spent years trusting paperwork more than people, he said softly. I convinced myself that following procedure was enough, even when my conscience whispered otherwise. For that failure, I asked forgiveness, not only from Lucas Carter, but from every innocent person whose voice deserved to be heard. No one moved. Emma stepped forward, still holding her father's hand. She smiled through her tears. You chose the truth. Those 4 quiet words settled over the courtroom like morning light after a long storm. Judge Harrison looked at the wheelchair beside him, then tightened his grip on his wooden cane. With visible determination, he slowly pushed himself upright. His legs trembled beneath him, and for a moment the room held its breath. One careful step, then another. Neither graceful nor effortless, each movement carried the weight of years spent believing he would never stand again. No miracle erased his pain. No magic restored his strength. Instead, courage carried him farther than fear ever had. The courtroom remained completely silent as Judge Harrison stood before them, not as a man suddenly healed, but as one finally free from the burden of surrender. Emma's eyes filled with tears as Lucas gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Hope had not changed the past, but it had given everyone present the strength to walk toward a better future, one honest step at a time. Lucas wrapped his arms around Emma and held her as though he could never let go again. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Every tear carried 18 months of fear, and every smile reflected a future they had almost lost forever. Around them, families whose lives had been shattered by false accusations embraced one another, knowing that justice had finally reached the people it had forgotten. Judge Harrison stepped forward, leaning gently on his cane. In the name of this court, he said, his voice filled with humility, I offer my deepest apology to every innocent family failed by a system that forgot its greatest duty. Justice is not merely about enforcing laws. It is about protecting the truth, even when doing so demands courage. His words echoed through the silent courtroom. Months passed. The conspiracy was dismantled piece by piece. Those responsible faced public trials, while every wrongful conviction connected to the network was reopened and reviewed. Families once burdened by shame finally reclaimed their names, their dignity, and their hope. Emma's extraordinary courage earned her the nation's highest civilian bravery award. Standing before thousands, she accepted the medal with the same quiet humility that had carried her into the courtroom. Judge Harrison founded the Justice Integrity Foundation, dedicated to reviewing suspicious convictions and ensuring no innocent voice would ever again be ignored because it lacked power or influence. Lucas chose a different path. Instead of rebuilding only his own life, he traveled across the country, speaking to victims of false accusations and reminding them that perseverance could outlast even the darkest injustice. One crisp autumn afternoon, father and daughter returned to the courthouse, not for another trial, but simply to walk together down its wide stone steps beneath a clear blue sky. Emma slipped her small hand into Lucas's. They smiled without looking back. Sometimes the smallest voice is the one that wakes the conscience of an entire nation. Real miracles begin when ordinary people choose truth over fear. Together they walked toward the future, not because the world had become perfect, but because courage had finally made justice possible. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to let us know in the comments. What lesson did you learn from Emma's courage, and where are you watching from today? We'd truly love to hear from you. And if you believe stories like this remind us why truth, faith, and justice still matter, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another inspiring story. Until next time, remember, never underestimate the power of one brave voice. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the world.